Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Tim Walsh coming to you live from the campus of the University of Illinois here at the Illinois Fire Service Institute, where today Pat Kenny and I are going to be talking about Mayday for mental health. So we're going to let you get signed in. Please tell us where you're watching from. We're going to post today's handouts in the comments section so you can follow along. And let us know where you're watching from, and we really want your input today. So questions about anything that Pat and I are talking about in the next 45 minutes, please chime in. We hope you join us, and we'll see you in a minute. Hey, everybody. Tim Walsh coming to you live from the University of Illinois at the Illinois Fire Service Institute. Today we're talking to you from the Learning Resource Center and the Research Wing over here at the Fire Service Institute. I'm joined today by Pat Kenny, the Chief of the Western Springs Fire Department, and he and I are going to be talking about Mayday for mental health. And I'd like to call out our partners right away like we usually do in all our forums. So this is a grant-funded resiliency program that we deliver here at the Illinois Fire Service Institute. Pat and I are by no means experts, but we've reached out to experts in the field to provide a course for firefighters, paramedics, dispatchers, and police officers all across the state that's grant funded so that we can help people. And one of the biggest resources that we have in the fire service is our ability to help each other. And this class, this program that Pat and I are going to be talking about, and Pat's personal experience and how it affected him as a chief officer and a firefighter in the state is what we want to talk about. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Pat, let him introduce himself, and we'll get started here. Pat?
Well, thanks, Tim. First of all, I want to thank the Institute for what they've done about making mental illness and resiliency a key component of the curriculum that they've worked on. This is obviously a real passionate subject for me to talk about. I'll tell you a little bit about my background. So I've been in the fire service for almost 39 years. I retire actually a week from today. And you talk about anxiety, about leaving something that you love and that you do, and what am I going to do and how am I going to feel? That's a pretty normal reaction, and so this is really kind of timely for me too, talking about it. I got involved in the whole topic because our son Sean, when he was 20, died by suicide. He had dealt with mental illness for almost 15 years, and so there was a passion about coming out with this topic and talking about it. And I'm thrilled to be here today. And what I would really encourage for those of you who are out there watching, if you're sitting in the firehouse, go grab your buddies and drag them over. This doesn't seem, this is never a sexy topic, and it scares a lot of people because they don't understand it. And so please, it involves your family, your firehouse family, as well as your personal family. So we want an all-in today. And as Tim said, not an expert in this at all, but have a lot of experience. And so any way we can help people, that's what we're here for today.
Yeah, so let's talk about our funding partners here at the Institute that help provide this program. REACT, the Lieutenant Ryan Elwood Awareness Project, is a huge supporter of this project all across the state, as is the Illinois Office of the State Fire Marshal. They provide grant funding so that we, Pat, and the Institute can take this training on the road, provide it to any emergency services organization in the state. So comment here to us and let us know if you want this training. Contact us afterwards or hit your email in the comment section and we'll follow up with you and we'll get you this training for free. So if you have any questions about what Pat and I are talking about, please post it in the comments section. Like I said, our awareness package for resources for you at your local jurisdiction, both in the state of Illinois and at the national level, and even for police officers and dispatchers, is already on the linked site, so use that as well. So Pat, let's jump right into it. Let's start with a question. If you had to deliver one single important message about mental health and resiliency in the fire service, what would it be?
I think the most common misconception is you've got this wall, this barrier that divides physical illness and mental illness. And what people don't realize is that mental illness is a physical illness, that it's all contained in that one spot. And so we kind of evaluate them independently. So one doesn't have a stigma and one does. So let me give you some examples. Your brain is wired for survival. I mean, that's just the way we are, and a lot of our reactions are driven by our biological responses. They're not based on choices. And the same thing happens when you're dealing with an illness. Somebody doesn't wake up on a Monday morning and go, gee, I'd really like to have pancreatic cancer today. That's kind of where I'd like to go. And at the same token, somebody doesn't wake up on that same Monday morning and go, I'd really like to have bipolar or have OCD or have a deep depression. But we don't look at it that way. We look at, well, that's a shame that person was diagnosed with the pancreatic cancer. We look at the other one as some type of a character deficiency. And I always like to use the example that you wouldn't walk down the floor of a pediatric cancer unit and stick your head in the door and go, hey, you loser, hey, you quitter, hey, you weakling, hey, you coward. And yet when we look at the mental health side, we look at it and say somebody who's dealing with depression, it's like, you just got to suck it up. You really got to this is just a matter of being tougher. It's a decision on your part to suffer through this particular weakness. As opposed to, you've got chemicals that are interacting in a complicated way in your body that drive diseases just the way they drive diabetes or high blood pressure, and you may have no control over that, and we should just be trying to treat that the same way you would any other physical illness. But not only the fire service, and so we're generalizing this, so please don't take it as it's only our profession, including first responders. This is the general public around the world that deals with this. Is something we don't understand, we kind of push away and we label it, because it just makes it a heck of a lot easier. And when it comes to mental illness, that's what's been going on for centuries. And we've come a long way, the fire service, in terms of, as you and I talked about it, Tim, we'd never be talking about this topic 20 years ago.
No.
Now we've come to where we realize that this impacts everybody and that it's a normal thing to have to deal with. And treating it, when you deal with it like you would a physical illness, is where we need to get to in order to really reduce and remove most of that stigma.
Yeah, a couple other partner organizations that we deal with are Illinois Firefighter Peer Support, huge partner of ours, and they help us deliver this product out on the street. And then the chaplaincy and advocacy programs all across the state of Illinois, and chaplains are starting to get involved and get trained in this. And Father Tom O'Crone was a big organizer in this early in his career. He's since retired, but he's still involved. And another question that we would like to ask and kind of talk about is, we're all really good at taking care of each other, but we're not so good at self-care. And what's the biggest mistake people make, firefighters, paramedics, dispatchers, police officers, about self-care, taking care of ourselves?
I really believe when you come into this vocation, and now I'm going to talk, when I talk about firefighters, I'm talking about your group, whether you're a volunteer, a paid on call, a career. When I use that term, it's a vocation. It's not an occupation, so it's not dependent on whether you get a paycheck or not. Once you come into this vocation, I really believe you're handed a cape. And that cape allows you to do things that other people can't do. It allows you to go places other people can't go. And it's an amazing honor to be part of this profession. The bad news about that is that cape also can act as a choking mechanism, because you always believe that you can make a difference. You always believe that you can save the day. And I have found in my own personal life, through the loss of our son, and then we also had my wife pass away from brain cancer, if there were 2 times that I wanted that cape to do something, if there were 2 times I really believed I had some kind of power to make a real difference in life, that's the only 2 times I wanted it to work.
Yeah.
And it didn't. And so finding out in that scenario that as a perfectionist, which I think most of us in the fire service, we are AAA personalities. You probably find it hard to admit that, but you all know that you are. And because we are, when something goes wrong, when we're faced with a crisis, whether that's in the emergency scene, in the firehouse, or in your own home, what do we do in terms of reacting to it?
And we want to fix it.
Right. And and in order to do that, we say we will work harder, we will work longer, we will push harder, we will not give up. And so I see that there are like two paths that you go down when you're in that situation. And the one path is more, more, more. Throw more at it and it's going to take care of it. Now I will eventually, when I get to the end of that road, I will have a successful outcome. And really what happens in that scenario is you keep running into more losses and feeling inadequate and starting to get depressed. And so you push the pedal even harder, and now you find yourself really in a state of a deep depression to where you begin to wonder, is it worth being here anymore? Maybe they'd be better off without me. And that's how people can get to that suicidal ideation of, really, maybe I better go. The other path that you can go on is to have the courage as a leader to look and go, I need some help on this because I'm not making any headway. I'm feeling horrible about what's going on. And you seek out counseling to help you get stronger. And I'll use this example because I am the worst person about self-care. If there has been a chink in my leadership armor that sticks out, it's self-care. And the reason that is that I never know and have figured out when it's time to say when. And my wife used to call it the God flu. So every year, from the time I was a chief officer, at least once a year, I'd end up in bed for a couple of days with what I called flu-like symptoms, and they seemed like that to me. And then one year she said to me, she goes, you keep getting the God flu. I'm like, the heck is a God flu? And she said, well, that's when God looks at you and realizes that you're not quite smart enough to take a break. So he knocks you on your rear end so that you are out for a while. You have to replenish your system. You have to take a break from mind-wise from the firehouse, and you just need to bring it back up. Because I really believe, and a counselor told me one time, I think it's a great analogy, is you have an emotional bank account. And that emotional bank account, like all of ours, is you've got deposits and withdrawals. As first responders and as people who wear the cape, we tend to do a lot of withdrawals. We're not very good at that word, no. We just got it, I'll take it on. And so here go your withdrawals. But in the meantime, you're not putting in any deposits. And eventually you'll be emotionally bankrupt. So that self-care aspect means I'm going to take time for myself. Well, I can't take off because there's this particular crisis going on. Here's just a little clue for everybody. There's always a crisis going on, and you're not that important. And I'm speaking like I'm talking into the mirror to myself when I have to give myself that pep talk. You're not really that important, so you can take some time. I'll give you a perfect example. I went away the day of the election this year when everybody was planning for some very difficult situations to occur. And it was really hard for me on what was a vacation that was planned for a long time to go because it was like, I need to be home just in case. Just in case what? Just in case the people I have who are amazing in my organization can't handle it and the rest of the world is going to go to hell in a handbasket because Pat Kenny's not around? No, it was not realizing that I was depleted. I was shot at that point and I needed to go somewhere to refuel, and it was okay. We train people in the academy when they're driving a fire engine. Don't drive like a maniac, because if you don't get there with your crew intact, safely, there's no way then that you can perform what you need to do to help those people. But we don't write ourselves that same permission slip. So if I came into you, Tim, and I said, I just found out that my daughter has a really bad disease, and I know that we're short-shifted, but I need to take some time off to get together with my family and find a doctor, what would you say to me?
I'm hopefully sending you home. That would be my response, and I'll cover your shift, but I'm getting you out of the firehouse as quick as I can.
Absolutely,
Get you
because
home to your family.
you'd care.
Yeah.
You'd know what to do. But you wouldn't look in the mirror and do the same thing for yourself. And we don't do that. We don't give ourselves the same love and affection and permission to be human that we give to our own people. And I think that's one aspect that we really miss in the fire, in any first responding and emergency personnel, is we don't take care of ourselves. And if you don't take care of yourself first, if you don't seek that help, that outside advice of things to do, you start down that path and all of a sudden you could get to the end of that tunnel and it could be so dark that the consequences are irreversible.
Yeah. So You and I talked about this a little bit earlier before we went on camera today, and we pre-plan everything in the fire service, right? Ad nauseum.
Right.
Everything we can think of. We sit around the coffee table and we pour coffee and we drink pots of coffee talking about, we're gonna do this if this happens, at this location, on this day, at this time, with this manpower or person power. But we never really sit down and talk about how we're gonna pre-plan an event on our shift, in our station, in our town, as it relates to mental health of the people that we serve with and the people that we serve. So let's talk a little bit about that.
So I'm kind of known, and I've been fortunate to be the chief in 2 organizations in Hinsdale and in Western Springs. And I'm kind of known for writing SOPs. Like, I could probably fill this library with all the SOPs that I've written. You really have to have an SOP for what are you going to do for mental health challenges. And in most organizations, not throwing stones, but some of you are probably nodding at this point, there really isn't anything done until after the fact. It's reactive. We lose a hero that takes their life, and we go, what did we miss? What do we need to do? So the human pre-planning part goes exactly what you were talking about at the kitchen table. I always used to laugh as part of assessment centers for promotion. You know, it's a small incident. It's a train versus a bus, but of course the bus had 70 nuns on it, and they had 35 handicapped children, and there's only 3 of you on the engine. Fix it. And we'd go, okay, we have to add this resource and look for this and look for this and look for this. But when somebody struggles with a mental health challenge, we don't have that structure in place already. So the challenge becomes, how do you do that? So when you do human pre-planning, you start with, we're going to make the assumption from the very beginning that somebody's going to run into one of these issues, which, whether you believe it or not, it's going on in your own organization right now or in your own life. It just is. So put away the what ifs, tabbing. So what do we do when that occurs? Right? How do we recognize it? And I like to use the analogy when we're talking about mental illness being a physical illness is when you have a back injury. So let's say you have a back injury, physical illness, all right? Where we train in the academy, you're gonna use proper lifting techniques. We're gonna make sure we're gonna protect your back. And there are cases where that doesn't happen. And just like you come into the fire service and you come in strong and you feel like you're mentally, you can deal with anything, and then you realize that's not true because you're human. The person with the back injury, we say, okay, when that happens that you can't do it the right way and you feel something, what do? The first thing you do is you notify somebody. Right. The second thing happens, then they send you to somebody who's a vetted professional to go, we're going to take a look at this, evaluate to what degree are you hurt. You might need some medication, you might even need some physical therapy, but the overall goal is to bring you back to the department 100%. So that's a pre-plan for an injury that we can't anticipate. So now we take people in the fire service, and no matter what country you're in, what language you speak, we all have the same heart. When you choose this vocation, you care. We then expose them to the worst things that they will ever see and don't anticipate that it's going to affect them. So we miss right there in the beginning without not having a pre-plan. So start the pre-plan by going, let's take that same checklist. Okay, somebody has something occur, whether it's in their family or it's in their profession, and it's a trigger, and it's something that makes them upset. Okay, so what's the first thing they should do? Tell somebody. Oh, no, I'm not telling anybody. Right, because it's considered a weakness. Right. It's part of that stigma. So we now have to be concerned about it. So you tell somebody. After you tell somebody, then they send you to somebody who's been trained to know that there's an issue going on and that what you want to do is address it. Now, that may require medication. It may not require medication. It may require therapy, or it may not require therapy. But the same goal is there of getting you back on the job at 100%. But we're afraid to do that. And it's one of the reasons that what we call the program today, Mayday for Mental Health, was to try and make that analogy of how do you take that mental health challenge environment and bring it next to the fire service. And really, for eons, you're supposed to call Mayday on a fire scene when you think you're in trouble. When we really call Mayday is when we think we're about to go see the big guy. And it's the same thing on mental illness, except really magnified, because I don't want to come forward and tell you as the chief or my company officer, yeah, I'm really depressed, I'm really struggling here on, because I'm going to feel that somebody's going to label me as being weak, or you're not worthy of promotion, whatever. And so they wait to call a Mayday until it's almost too late,
Yeah.
and sometimes it is too late.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into our next topic. We had one question come in about, from a chaplain, and he wants to know, how can chaplains get better involved in the process, early in the process, so that they can respond to a call of that type in their own department, which leads to the next question that we were actually gonna talk about, which is, who should we be training, and when should we start training them?
That's great. So we'll deal with the chaplain question first, because that is an awesome question. In many departments, when I go out and do my son's talk, one of the things that comes up is, what do we do about our response for our people, because we have no budget. We're volunteers. We don't have an employee assistance program. We don't have a robust resource we can turn to, but we do have our chaplain. Well, it's unfair to expect chaplains to know exactly what we do. And for the first time that you meet them, to be in the most critical situation you can be in, for me to lean over and go, Tim, I've never met you before, but I'm about to tell you about this horrible situation and how I'm feeling very inept.
Right.
So the training for chaplains is, first of all, and this is true also for for your EAP, it's also true for your counselors that see people after the EAP is over, is you need to teach them about the fire service culture. And we have a culture. We're always trying to improve this. I get into a struggle sometimes with people who go, Pat, quit telling me that you want to change our culture. We love our culture. That's not the message about mental health.
No.
The message about mental health is we want to improve the current culture.
Yeah, it's always been part of the culture.
Absolutely.
We just have to address the issue.
Correct,
Yeah.
right. And it's no different than when we went from 3/4 boots to bunkers. It wasn't the matter that there was anything wrong with 3/4 boots. We just were able to improve safety by going to bunkers, so we go with mental health. So you bring your chaplains in. Now you have to tell your people why you're doing that, especially if you're looking at also bringing counselors in, because you know what goes through the firehouse. Hey, somebody here, there's something wrong with somebody here, because that's why that person's here. I need to know who that person is.
Yeah, it breeds familiarity.
Correct.
And trust.
And that's it. We always worry about it, and it's always come up with mental health, is I don't want people to know, because the confidentiality will go out the window. This will be all through the firehouse, and it'll be all through administration, it'll be all through the city. And here you are in a scenario where you bring a chaplain in, somebody who's given their oath for faith. Who else can you trust? But I still need to get to know you a little bit, so the first time I talk to you is not on my worst day. And so that's the training I think that you have to have. Aiming it then from baseline firefighter up starts. You spoke earlier about the peer support. Couldn't be more important, because many times the challenges at the mental health level do not need to go to a counselor or a psychiatrist or the EAP. It can be done on the tailboard. It really can be. Talking to another peer, because we always talk about nobody really understands what we do except us. Well, that's not unique to the fire service. I don't understand what an accountant does. I don't understand what the challenges some of the other professions are. But we do know what our challenges are. And we can sit down and I can talk to you and say, Tim, I don't know about you, but that call that we had 2 weeks ago, and I know that woman that we lost her, she was 90 years old and had a good life, and I wasn't gonna make all those rational things. But that 90-year-old, she reminded me of my grandmother.
Sure.
And while we're doing CPR, I'm thinking about my grandmother. Does that sound stupid to you? Does that sound weird to you?
No.
Right.
Right.
And it gives you a chance as a peer to go, well, yeah, I had a call 3 years ago that I still can't get out of my head, because it reminds me of somebody. It normalizes it. It smashes the hell out of that stigma of mental illness, which is really the push of what we're trying to do. Mental illness is a physical illness. It should be treated the same, with the same respect, and take the stigma part out of it.
And then that goes back into the time frame, the second part of the question that we want to talk about. When do we start this?
Right.
Who do we talk to? Because you and I talked about this a little bit before we went on camera.
Right.
It involves more than just the responder.
Correct.
And all the other organizations that are involved, dispatchers, police, ancillary personnel.
Right.
And chaplains need to be involved in that too. And unless you're an expert in the field, it's bare bones conversation between you and I, just like we're having now.
Right.
And then we refer to an expert, a psychologist or psychiatrist that's trained in the field and familiar with the fire service.
Correct.
So let's talk about when that training should start and who it should address.
So I think most organizations where they miss the boat on this is, you should start as you're recruiting people. So before they ever fill out an application, before they ever come on your job, so again, whether you're volunteer, career, or combination, you should let them know what are they about to come into. Because not everybody's cut out to be a firefighter. And that doesn't mean that we're some special breed. It just means we're a different breed. And so let them know you're going to see horrible things. You're going to feel helpless. You're coming here, everybody we do in an interview, you say, well, why would you like to be a firefighter? Because I want to make a difference. Correct, and wonderful, and true. You're not always going to make a difference. So do you know that? And do you know that you're going to be facing some difficult situations that you're never going to forget? I have a brother-in-law that got into the fire service because somebody was hired before him, and literally 2 days after this person was on the job, his wife said, I didn't realize this is what it was. Please don't stay because I can't live a life like that. That family wasn't educated. So you do your due diligence and tell people this is what the whole job is. Then when you bring people in for your orientation to talk about, are you going to be part of our department, what does that include? So one of the things back to our generation is the expectation that you're going to do beyond your fire job description. So if Tim's got a leaky furnace and it happens to be a day that he's on duty, the expectation is somebody's going to go over and help his wife with that leaky furnace. Well, nowadays they go, well, people don't do that anymore. That was your generation. People they're not all in anymore, and that's just not fair because
That's not true.
Exactly. If you haven't talked about it in your orientation and said, you know what, if somebody's having a problem in their home, there's an expectation that we're all going to jump in and we'll help shingle a roof or whatever. Then when they don't do that, how can you hold them accountable? So in the orientation you talk about, here's what's going to happen. You also let the families know, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, significant other, spouse.
Correct.
Family members.
Because they're the first ones that are going to recognize
A change.
that there's
in
issues.
behavior maybe,
Absolutely. No question about it. And so we have a program in place. If you are affected, and you will be at some point, we don't know to what degree, here's what we do. Here's who you talk to. Here's where you go. Here's the confidentiality that we have. Here's the follow-up that we do. And it is, as we talked before, Tim, and an institute philosophy from cradle to grave is from the time you're thinking about becoming a firefighter all the way into your retirement. Now I'm retiring a week from today. I'm scared to death. I'm as anxious as can be. I'm going to need help to go.
It's not so bad.
Where I'm hoping so, but I'm not. I'm going to miss my people. I'm going to miss my team. I'm a team guy. I would have made a very poor police officer. I just need that team. And I'm nervous about that. And we end up with a lot of people in retirement because there's been no mental health program in their department to start with.
Yeah.
No retiree feels comfortable even coming back in the firehouse, let alone asking for help. If you don't make that as part of your normal pre-plan,
right,
that group's going to be lost.
Invite them back. Invite them back for coffee
Absolutely.
once a year or whenever they want to come back. Yeah,
and if they say no, just keep telling them.
Yeah.
You're welcome whenever you want. The door is open, and that's important. So I think that pre-plan's got to be in place, and those are the individuals you touch from the significant others all the way up until you get into the resources.
And the chaplains as well,
Correct.
I would think, right?
Yep,
Because they
absolutely.
need to be aware that this training is available and that this help is available and how it would affect family members if they're not familiar with it.
Right. And when you
Right.
put that plan together, make sure also when you're adding those professionals, like if we're talking about an employee assistance program, it shouldn't be check the box. I'll talk to some departments and go, do you have a behavioral health program or whatever you want to call it? And they'll say, well, yeah, we have an EAP. Okay, well, what have your EAP counselors been trained in as far as the fire service? Well, they're really good at what they do, and yeah, so are we, but that doesn't mean that I can go out and be a dentist tomorrow. So what are you doing about that? And then letting your own people know what are the restrictions on that. Well, you're only going to get 3 to 5 visits at the EAP, and then you're going to have to find another counselor. And in the fire service, if you're handing me just a list after that, and I actually feel better after those 3 visits, I'm like done. I don't need to go see anybody else. It took guts to come in here, and now if I only go to 3, maybe nobody else finds out about this. So I'm finished, and I'll just move on. And like taking half of your antibiotics once you feel better, it can sometimes lead to you being even more ill. So letting them know, once you finish those visits, here's a list of 5 other counselors that we've vetted, we've interviewed, we know the fire service, we know the confidentiality will be between you and them, and we've had great feedback about the outcome of dealing with this man or woman, and you can trust that person.
Yeah, and we've mentioned some of those professionals that we work with here at the State of Illinois Fire Academy, and we're remiss in remembering one, the Rosecrans Florian program,
Correct.
administered by Danny DeGrice, my old partner at Engine 42 at Truck 3, great man,
absolutely.
does a great job at that program at Rosecrans, and he's a professional, and he's in the service, and that's another great resource for people that are looking. All the resources that we're talking about today are in the comments section, and those resources are not only for state of Illinois fire departments, national fire departments all across the nation, internationally, and then we also have resources on the second page. Print that second page for our brothers and sisters in blue. We know that they've been taking a huge beating in this past year, what's been going on in their profession, and we want to reach out to them and take care of them as well. So Pat, let's get into another question here. What can a leader, and there's all different kinds of leaders in the firehouse. You and I talk about, there's the formal leader, the informal leader, the senior person, the barn boss, whatever you want to call them. What changes should they be looking for that would kind of make them intrigued to seek counseling or help somebody or get them the help that they need?
It's a great point. So there's a real fear factor about when you're dealing with the mental health side and you notice a change in behavior in terms of where do I cross the line if I'm sticking my nose into somebody else's business. So the example I like to give is that if you came into the fire station and one morning and you sat down and said, you know, I must be getting old. Like those 5 steps I came up coming in here, I'm kind of short of breath and got a little bit of chest pain, some tingling down my left arm, and got a little bit in my jaw, and immediately everybody at the table would jump.
Yeah, go get the monitor.
Absolutely.
Tell everybody we're out of service. We can't take a run.
We're
right?
taking it
Sit
back.
down, Pat. We're going to take your blood pressure.
Right. Absolutely.
Right.
And how did you know? Why did you know?
Because that's what we get paid to do, and that's what we're trained to do, and
Right.
we're easily able to make that jump to help somebody in a physical aspect. This is a physical aspect as well.
Correct.
So we need to make the jump to recognize that mental illness is a physical illness.
Right.
And to provide that same care.
Correct. And the difference being, Tim, is we don't train people in that. You jumped right away all over it, as all of you, I'm sure, sitting out there went, well, geez, this is a no-brainer. I know what I do. So now I'm going to paint a different scenario for you. So I'm the guy who's in your firehouse, who's the jokester everybody loves. Even your wives even love me. And all of a sudden I show up for work and I start sitting in the recliner and just staring off into space. I don't interact. I'm very quiet during drills. I go to bed early. I'm normally the guy who asks for seconds or thirds when we eat dinner, and now I'm hardly eating anything at all. So you notice a specific behavior change, signs and symptoms. People always want to ask me, you know, give me the signs and symptoms. What do I see for suicide? It's like, it's not that easy.
No.
It doesn't happen that way. You can't judge a book by its cover. Sometimes people who are thinking about committing suicide, my son, the last couple of days before he died by suicide, the people who saw him said they would have never known because he seemed so happy. Well, he was happy because he knew he wasn't going to be in that pain in a few days. So you can't judge it by that. So what do we do in that scenario? Well, you need to approach that person and don't start it off by going, are you okay? Because I don't care what language you speak, what country you're in as a firefighter, if you say to a firefighter, are you okay? They could be missing an arm and a leg and they're going, I'm fine, I'm okay, I got it, Chief.
I'm good.
5 more minutes,
Yeah.
we're good. So try this instead. Is there anything I can do for you? Now the danger of asking that is if they're going to answer in the affirmative, you need to know what exactly you're going to do about that. So we're back to the plan. Like, all right, what are my resources if somebody says, yeah, you know what, I am so depressed, I just feel like I can't get out of bed in the morning, or worse yet, I'm so depressed, I don't want to live anymore. I don't want to be here. We don't train people to do that. So if you go up to somebody and say, is there anything I can do for you? And they go, yes, and you don't have any resources, the normal reaction is to go, let's start all over again. Are you okay? Because then the reaction is going to be, oh yeah, then I'm fine, I'm good, we're going to be fine. Don't trust that. Trust that little voice inside of you that I really believe drives people, and you call it whatever you want to, that says there's something wrong here. I need to intervene. That thing that makes you good as a firefighter as part of your vocation also makes you well trained to know when something's wrong. You don't know what it is, and you can't fix it, but you sure the hell can say, is there anything I can do to help you? And they may not be comfortable talking to you, so peer support works. Some cases it doesn't. Your approach can be, you may not be comfortable with me, but how about if I provide these resources for you? So we're back to the chaplains or your EAP or your counselors. I've got a toolbox. We always talk about put another tool in your toolbox
Sure.
in the fire service. It's the same thing for mental health. Put another tool in there that says, maybe you'd like to talk to so-and-so. Can I please put you in touch with them because I think that's going to work. And then the last part of your plan is follow-up. You're going to get a lot of people who are going to push
I was there.
They're
I was gonna ask, that's my next
They'll,
question.
they'll
yeah.
push back at you and go, I really am fine. And they may be at that moment. They may have climbed back out of the hole a little bit and they're telling you the truth. But you know they're still stumping, gurgling.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to push. Well, I'm being a real pain in the rear end. I always said I would much rather be a pain in the rear end and have you looking at me angry than bury you 2 weeks later because I was afraid to push hard enough. So realizing that if you were walking around limping for 3 weeks, I would also push and go, you better go get that knee checked because you're going to end up screwing yourself up worse and you are going to end up at a fire where maybe you're not going to be able to take care of your brother or sister or go get that resident. We want you 100%, and that means completely, and that includes your mental health as part of your physical health.
Let's get into a couple of difficult subjects here before we go to the next question, and you wanted me to bring these up when we first talked about it. Let's talk about best laid plans, and let's talk about suicide's effect on living.
Okay, so let's talk about if you have you have a great plan. It's airtight. Does that mean nobody in your organization is going to take their life? And the answer to that is no. That absolutely still happens in some wonderful organizations around the country who have some robust programs now. Still lose people. Okay, well, how's that possible if we provided all these things? Remember, what's going on in their body is physically. So just the same as somebody who's diabetic cannot will away the diabetes. Somebody who's dealing with clinical depression, who's dealing with OCD, who's dealing with bipolar, maybe even a combination of all of those, it drives them into such a depth that in their mind, there's only one choice, and that's suicide. Yeah. And people get labeled as, well, those are cowards, those are people who they weren't strong enough to stick it out. And the other argument that I hear a lot is, but they had everything to live for, Tim. I mean, they had a beautiful wife, they had a great job, they have a wonderful home, they have wonderful kids. How could you be so depressed that you would take your life? And look what you did to those people. Here's what you need to know about suicide. It isn't about doing it to other people. My son, when he got to that point, there's no question in my mind, there was nothing on his radar about the pain that was going to cause his mother. The love of his life was his mom, who stuck by him through everything he went through in those 15 years, all the hospitalizations, the suicide attempts. The one who was there holding his hand was his mom, not me, because I was still wearing a cape going, I'm going to save the day. She was there taking care of what was going on. And the realization that at some point he didn't want to be here so bad, she wasn't there. Nobody thinks about that at that point. I've learned that through the years of trying to read, like how do you get to that point? And it's that feeling of loss of hope. There's loads of suicide theories and doctors who've researched it and are way smarter than me. But that commonality of I don't have any hope anymore and I have pain and I need to get out of this and there's only one door to go through. Yeah. And this is it. So remembering you can do everything you can and that still may happen, but those people are not cowards because we are wired to live. That fight, flight, basics is there because we want to stay alive. So you have to fight through that and put yourself in so much pain that you deny that and go, I'm better just to go. And I can't imagine being in that darkness, but I will tell you, after my wife died, it was the first inkling I had of what it can be like that you don't want to get out of bed in the morning. Yeah. That you're really not sure that you want to be around. And it's a normal feeling that you go through. And almost everybody along the continuum has started down that road. It's a matter of knowing when to go, I need to go Mayday, 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 and get some help to get you back on your path.
Yeah, so we had another question come in, Pat, and I'm going to address that. And I want to call this out. You guys have been watching me look down at my phone. I'm looking down at my phone so I can monitor your questions as they come in. I'm not trying to be rude, so let me just take a look here and make sure. How important it is for departments, chief officers, and just everybody, the chaplains, the EAP, whether the EAP is a city program or a union program, to all sit down and talk about this and make sure everybody's on the same page and everybody knows that it's available.
Huge, huge. We talk about in the beginning when we were trying to get mental health awareness out there, we talked about putting posters up and putting different things in firehouses, and you had various reactions to that. Sometimes it was positive, sometimes it was suspicious.
Sometimes it's rip it down when nobody's around. I'm throwing it in the trash because I don't believe in it.
Absolutely.
Right? So you got to have multiple copies.
Yeah. You really have to be, just like you are in anything that when you're trying to improve a culture, you have to be consistent. You just have to come back and go, this is a message, And you may not be able to relate to it today at all. I hope you can't. But someday you will, whether it's you or somebody outside your family. So it's important to make sure that you continue that path. That every report that you read about a line of duty death, what's the number one thing that's always reported as being an issue? Communications. So we don't end up then as organizations, and I hate to admit it, sometimes even organizations that are well-meaning get territorial. You know, well, this is my area. This is so they don't talk to each other. Examples of big cities who have an EAP that you've got one that's part of the local and one that's not. Well, we don't talk to each other. Are you kidding me? What's the mission? I'm always back to what's your mission?
Mission is the people.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and it shouldn't matter who gets the credit for crying out loud. People need to go to where they're comfortable, and you need to encourage that. Hey, if it's not me, Joe over here is wonderful. You should go talk to Joe because it's a great thing, and we'll cover that, and here's how it goes. And they all need to know that. And again, they need to know that from the very beginning. Because if they've been on the job for 15 years and it's the first time they're faced to ask that question, they will not, you're white noise until that hits. It doesn't matter. Keep telling them so they know, because you may not know, but when you start to talk about it, I'll go, Tim, you haven't been listening. That number's been on that board for 3 years. Go over there. Here's the number. Here's who you call. I'll call it for you. I'll go with you if you want.
Sure.
So that they have the support that they need, and that's got to come through the city, through the department, and it's got to be top down. If you don't, for those of you who are chief officers, I will just tell you, I did not live that. Nobody in my organization, I was the chief of the Hinsdale Fire Department, one station, career organization. Everybody knew everybody. I knew their wives, their kids, their birthdays. We were family. And my wife and I chose specifically not to share Sean's pain because I was afraid he'd walk in the firehouse and people would go, there's a kid who's been in the hospital. There's the kid that's tried to commit suicide, which is not true. My wife, my sons would have had support if I had just shared with the culture, but I didn't do it. So if you're going to talk in the firehouse about we believe in your holistic health, including your mental health as part of your physical being, then you better live it. And one of the things is to just be able to share what are the resources, how do you get there, I'll help you in any way I can. And because sometimes people present as complete jerks. I had a chief after I did my son's talk who came up to me afterwards and he said, I got a guy I'm about ready to fire. Just brought him up on charges. He consistently is not a team player. He's a pain in the rear end. He's disrespectful, blah, blah, blah. He goes, you know, after I got done listening to you, I'm wondering if he's got some things going on and he's just never come forward.
Sure.
So he went back and he actually emailed me a couple months later and he said, we got him to go for an evaluation and we had no idea what he was dealing with at home. We've got him help. And he goes, he's turning it around, and he goes, I would have fired him. So having that communication through the organization that everybody knows you've got their back. You don't have to like each other. I mean, no firehouse everybody likes each other, but you love each other enough to protect your back. This is just another part of it.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about, we haven't talked about it yet. Why is this important to you? Let's talk a little bit about your book. Let's talk a little bit about the history of why this is an important subject for you and why you're a subject matter expert for the Illinois Fire Service Institute. And I don't mean a mental health subject matter expert. I mean a fire service subject matter expert as it deals with mental health. There's a difference.
There is.
Right? And you and I both know the difference. Hey, I can talk about this because I have some institutional knowledge about it, but I'm going to refer you to this professional
Correct.
to get help and
Correct.
take away the stigma and help my brother and help my sister. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So for all of you, and it's ironic being here at the University of Illinois doing this, I started my college career here. My degree is in psychology, and my mom said that was always the biggest waste of money that was ever spent because smart people run out of burning buildings and my thick-headed Irish kid runs in. So the things that you hear from me have nothing to do with that degree at all. What it has to do is with life experiences. So so I did write a book. I referred to earlier, my wife died of brain cancer, and she's the one that made me promise I would write this book. So I'll just show you real quickly in the book itself. That hand is hers. This arm that's coming is my son Sean, because he wrote when he was 10 years old on what do you want to be when you grow up. He wrote, I want to be a firefighter. And one of my biggest pains in life that I missed, I never got to pin that badge on him. But by what we're doing right now, he saved more people than anybody that I know in the fire service. And that cape is me. The cape is because I'm the one that was always trying to save the day. So Sean was diagnosed with clinical depression when he was 5. I didn't even know you could be clinically depressed at 5. I thought you could be sad or you got grounded. And my wife saw it right away and got treatment for him all through that 15 years. I kept denying it. No, this can't be, I'll fix it, kind of thing. He took his life when he was 20. My middle son always says about both my wife and he, and I love it. He always said, people say, well, it's a shame that you lost your brother. It's a shame that you lost your mom. He goes, I didn't lose either one of them. I know exactly where they are, and they're together. And that keeps me going. My wife had brain cancer, and at the end, she could not use her left side at all, just her right side, and she would love to hold your hand, and she would grip it, but she had so many tumors that you literally would have to peel her fingers across. When this cover got put together, and I certainly didn't have anything to do with that ingenuity, and the person who developed it didn't know the story, I started to cry when I saw that cover, because I went, it's her hand, it's a right hand, it's a woman's, and that gloved, bunkered arm is not mine. That's Sean on the other side. That's his firehouse. And my son, my little guy, was supposed to get married, and my wife was 13 days away from the wedding, and she said, I will be there for the wedding to my middle guy. And the next day, November 1st, she came back after I was running and told her best friend, who happened to be Sean's godmother, I'm not going to make the wedding. And I came in and I was disturbed, and I walked in. I go, what's going on? Just yesterday you told Patrick you were going to make it. And she said, I'm not going to make it. I'm going to make my transformation. I go, what changed? Said, I saw Sean. I go, where did you see Sean? She said, it was right there. And if you could have seen the conviction on her face, she saw him. I said, did he talk to you? And she said, yeah. I said, what did he say? He said, Mom, I'm coming to get you. And so we used to travel together to do Sean's talk, to share it.
Yeah.
Because I always felt like he suffered in vain because I didn't share the story. People didn't learn from it. I didn't enhance the culture of the Hinsdale Fire Department by being open. And this was like, I'm going to go out there and tell everybody, because he was a hero. You talk about if somebody takes their life, they're a coward. I watched this kid fight. I watched this kid suffer. I watched him research everything, trying to find an answer to get out of that pain, and just couldn't. And this allowed me now to go, okay, I can go on the road. Well, one of the things I was struggling with as I was look at the audience, and some of you may be struggling with this right now, and I understand it and go, gee, I really feel sorry for you, Chief. Those are some terrible losses, but I can't relate to it. We would do Sean's talk, and I could see about 70% of the audience, you could see in their eyes, Tim, by tears or just the way they were looking, they had experienced or knew of people who had severe mental health challenges or had taken their lives.
Yeah, if you're going to be in this business for any sort amount of time, people are going to die due to suicide.
Right.
People are going to have mental illness, and it's a part of the profession
Absolutely.
that has not been talked about up until probably the last 5 years, and that's why you and I are sitting here talking
Absolutely.
about it now.
Right. And so we talked about, okay, what do we do for that 30% that doesn't seem to get this? So we have to make them understand it's a physical illness. So let's pick a physical illness and let's put a slide in there and do the comparisons. How do you diagnose it? How do you treat it? What's the worst outcome that could be? That could be terminal, and then we would be struggling. So that's what we did. Put a slide in there that dealt with brain cancer. And so we had brain cancer versus mental health, and went through the whole thing, and all of it being very similar until you got to the final of it being terminal and somebody's life ending. And on the side of the cancer, you had heroism, you had meals, you had support, and on the end of the suicides, you had people who really sometimes just abruptly even stayed away. Not because they didn't care, they didn't understand and they didn't know, and so it was just easier to avoid. And we put that side-by-side slide in, and the feedback we got was unbelievable about, I didn't get it until I saw that. I didn't get it until you made it that real. When she was diagnosed, I remember sitting on the corner of the bed saying, didn't we know? Like, why did we pick that? We could have picked any disease, any other even kind of cancer, but we picked brain cancer, and now that's what you've got. And I believe, and I really am a believer, that if you're going to be resilient, you have to believe that there's another power out there. I'm not talking about formal religion. I'm not trying to push that on you at all. What I'm talking about is there's somebody or something out there. My son was at the edge of that bed, no question in my mind, because the relaxation, the joy, she hadn't seen her son for 10 years, and she knew she was going to see him soon.
And you and I talked about this earlier. People tell paramedics and firefighters all the time, hey, I'm going to die.
Right.
And they do.
Right.
And it's weird.
It is.
Right? And the first time it happens to you in this profession, you don't know what to say. But then you go back and talk to somebody that's been doing it for a while and say, yeah, people do that, that occurs. So we're gonna cover one quick question
Sure.
real succinctly, and then we're gonna start to wrap up.
Very good.
One thing, just the one thing that you would take away from mental illness that you would tell everybody today, the most important thing. Is it stigma?
So
Is it
I
buddy
would,
check-ins? What would you think it would be?
I would say it's, first of all, is admitting and recognizing that it's a physical illness. And then it's sharing. Don't be afraid to share your story. We had talked previously about a paramedic who had been sitting in a firehouse, and he had a female firefighter who had diabetes, routinely would give herself an insulin shot in the morning. Nobody thought anything about it. One day he put pills on the table and everybody went, what's this all about? And he said, oh, I have bipolar. And somebody had the courage to go, what happens if you don't take your medication? He said, well, very much like her, if she doesn't take her medication, the chemicals all change and she can't perform. If I don't take mine, it does exactly the same thing. Well, what do you mean? He goes, well, in the middle of the night, I might want to put an axe in your head. And everybody just kind of sat there and looked at him like, and he went, I'm just kidding. And then he looked at him and goes, well, maybe not. And he said, the point was, this is a chemical imbalance that we both have, but he shared it.
They broke the ice.
And they were like, you have that? It's like, yeah, I do. You didn't even notice it. And that's the point. We are dealing with human beings who all care, who are wonderful people in our profession, and we need to keep them in our profession. We need to keep them alive, and their family members also. So share and don't be afraid. I'm not unique, and I'm not a great speaker. The only reason this has been embraced is because I share their stories.
Well, thanks for joining us today, Pat. We want to wrap up today by talking about how this training is free to firefighters, paramedics, police officers all across the state of Illinois. It's grant funded by our friends at React for Ryan Elwood and by the Illinois State Office of the Fire Marshal. We're also helped by the Rosecrans Florian Program and Illinois Firefighter Peer Support and all our chaplains across the state of Illinois. On the second page, like I said before, there's resources there for our brothers and sisters in blue all across the country. Make sure you take care of them as well. And then there's national resources at the bottom of the first page that include Safe Call Now, Share the Load, the National Suicide Prevention Line, and a Veterans Crisis Line as well, because we want to take care of those who served for us. So we appreciate you joining us here at the Illinois Fire Service Institute. We'll be coming back to you all year long with live fire training, different topics, and we'll be back in February with another topic. We look forward to seeing you here. Thanks for joining us. Take care of each other out on the street and be safe.